The sun was sinking behind the Texas hills, turning the sky to a copper blaze, when Lady Arabella Whitmore, known to the locals only as the Duchess, stood on the high veranda of her father's sprawling ranch. The year was 1868, and though she was far from the ballrooms of London, Arabella carried herself as if she still ruled them. Her lace sleeves fluttered in the dry wind, and her chin tilted high with a pride that often made the cowhands call her the English rose with thorns. Her father, Lord Whitmore, had come to Texas seeking new fortunes after his title and estates in England were ruined by debt. The Whitmore Ranch was one of the largest in the county, guarded day and night by hired men. But the frontier was not the same as England's manicured gardens. Beyond the fences lay wilderness, dust, danger, and the ever-present threat of Comanche raids. Arabella had heard the stories: horses stolen at night, travelers vanishing without a trace. Still, she had never seen one of the feared warriors, herself. That changed at twilight. She was practicing archery behind the house, a habit that scandalized her governess, but thrilled her restless spirit when she noticed movement near the stables. A lone rider sat upon a paint horse, half-shadowed by the last light. He wasn't a ranch hand nor a settler. His dark hair streamed loose to his shoulders, his chest bare save for leather bands crossing it. He was still as a statue, watching her, her breath caught. For a moment she couldn't move. There was a power about him that struck deeper than fear, a calm confidence as though the land itself obeyed him. Then pride flared in her chest. No one, not even a savage of the plains, would look upon her as if she were a curiosity to be studied. Without thinking, Arabella lifted her bow. Her governess gasped from the porch. "My lady, don't!" But Arabella had already nocked an arrow, her heart pounding with something wild and unfamiliar. The man did not flinch. He simply watched her, as if daring her to try. She released. The arrow hissed through the evening air, silver in the dying light. But before it could reach him, his arm shot up and impossibly he caught it in mid-flight. Arabella froze. Her mind struggled to understand what she had just witnessed. The warrior looked down at the arrow in his hand, then back up at her. Slowly, deliberately, he broke it in two and let the pieces fall to the dust. Her stomach twisted, not with fear but with something hotter, humiliation, and a strange, reluctant awe. Their eyes locked across the field. His were dark as riverstone, filled with an intelligence and command she had never seen, even among her father's military guests. She had meant to frighten him away, to prove her courage. Instead, she felt as though he had seen directly through her, the loneliness, the fire she hid beneath silks and manners. He gave a faint smile, small and knowing, before turning his horse. With one smooth motion, he rode away into the rising dusk, vanishing among the cottonwoods without a sound. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the prairie grass. Arabella lowered her bow, her hands trembling slightly. Her governess muttered a prayer, urging her inside, but Arabella couldn't move. The moment replayed over and over in her mind, the effortless strength of his hand, the quiet challenge in his eyes. She didn't yet know his name. She didn't know that the man who had caught her arrow was called Tohano, a Comanche warrior who had lost brothers to white men's bullets. She didn't know that her single act of defiance had just bound their fates together. But as the sun disappeared and the first stars appeared, Arabella felt a strange certainty stir in her heart. Something in her world had just shifted, and there was no turning back. 3 days passed since the evening Arabella had loosed her arrow at the mysterious Comanche warrior. She told herself to forget it, to focus on her lessons, her embroidery, and her father's endless talk of business. Yet no matter how hard she tried, the image of that man's calm, unflinching gaze haunted her. When she closed her eyes, she saw the moment his fingers caught the arrow midair and the faint, knowing smile that followed. It was foolish, she told herself. Dangerous. But curiosity gnawed at her like hunger, so on the fourth morning, when her father rode to the neighboring ranch and the household fell quiet, Arabella saddled her mare and rode out toward the open plains. She told no one where she was going. She only meant to ride for an hour, to feel the wind on her face and the freedom of the wide world beyond the fences. The land stretched endlessly before her. Golden grass, scattered rocks, the cry of hawks overhead. It was beautiful, wild, and untamed, like a place untouched by time. The deeper she rode, the lighter she felt, as if she could breathe for the first time since coming to Texas. But the wind carried more than just the scent of sage. It carried whispers, hoofbeats. Arabella turned sharply in the saddle. The horizon shimmered with heat, and at first she thought her eyes were deceiving her. Then she saw them, riders emerging from the mirage. 5 Comanche warriors, their horses swift and silent as shadows. Panic seized her chest. She pulled the reins and spurred her mare toward the east, but the warriors closed in with terrifying speed. Her heart thundered. Dust filled her lungs. She heard the whine of an arrow fly past her shoulder. A shout rang out, a command in a language she didn't understand, and suddenly one of the riders pulled ahead of the rest. It was him, the same warrior who had caught her arrow days before. Before she could think, he reached for her reins and wrenched them from her grasp. Her horse reared in protest. Arabella's world tilted. Then she was lifted clean off the saddle, strong arms wrapping around her waist. "Let me go," she cried, striking at his shoulder. But her blows only met solid muscle. He spoke something sharp and low, and though she couldn't understand the words, his tone held no cruelty, only command. The other warriors circled briefly, shouting to one another, then fell back. He was their leader, she realized. Arabella twisted to look up at him, her breath short. His face was close now, closer than she'd ever imagined it would be. There was a faint scar along his jaw, and his eyes, dark and steady, were unreadable. "Why?" she demanded. "Why do this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he nudged his horse and rode west toward the setting sun. The wind whipped her hair loose, the world rushing past in a blur of dust and color. Fear mixed with confusion, then, strangely, with something else. Not safety, but a strange assurance that he wouldn't harm her. After what felt like hours, the plains gave way to rolling hills and then to a hidden valley where a cluster of lodges stood near a riverbank. Women and children looked up as they rode in, their chatter falling silent. Men paused from sharpening blades or tending fires, all eyes fixed on the pale stranger in the Comanche warrior's arms. He dismounted first, then lifted her down carefully, his grip firm but not unkind. She stumbled, her legs weak from the ride. The murmurs grew louder, some in wonder, some in anger. Arabella understood none of it, but she could feel their judgment, their suspicion. The warrior said something in his language, short, final. The others fell silent. Then he looked down at her, his voice deep and measured in English that carried a heavy accent. "You ride far from home, Duchess." Her heart stilled. He knew who she was. Before she could answer, he added, "You are not prisoner. You are mine to protect." And though his words were meant as assurance, they sounded like a promise that would change both their lives forever. Arabella awoke to the scent of smoke and the sound of drums faint in the distance. Her body ached from the long ride, and for a moment she thought she must still be dreaming. But when she opened her eyes, she found herself inside a round lodge made of hides and willow poles, the faint morning light spilling through the seams. A soft blanket, woven, not English, covered her legs. Then she remembered. The capture. The warrior. The words he'd spoken in his quiet, accented English. "You are mine to protect." Her stomach turned with unease. She sat up quickly, scanning the unfamiliar space. Her boots were gone, replaced by soft moccasins. Her bow was missing. Her riding dress was torn at the hem, dusted with dirt and ash. She was unarmed and utterly alone. A shadow filled the doorway. He stepped inside, the Comanche warrior, Tohano. Even without his weapons, he seemed dangerous, tall, broad-shouldered, his movements smooth and deliberate like a mountain cat. His black hair was tied loosely with leather cords, and the morning light caught the sharp line of his cheekbone. Arabella's breath quickened. "You have no right to keep me here." Tohano tilted his head slightly as though studying her reaction. "You shot at me," he said simply. His voice was calm, even faintly amused. "Now you are in my camp." "You can't," she began, but he raised a hand, silencing her. Outside, voices rose and fell, men speaking quickly, angry. She caught fragments of words she didn't understand, but their tone was unmistakable. They were arguing about her. Tohano looked toward the sound, his jaw tightening. Then, in a tone that brooked no defiance, he said, "Stay." He left the lodge. Arabella hesitated only a moment before crawling toward the doorway to listen. What she saw made her blood run cold. A circle of warriors surrounded Tohano, gesturing toward the lodge. Their eyes blazed. One of them, older and broader, shouted in fury, pointing at her. Though she couldn't understand the words, she didn't need to. They wanted him to trade her, perhaps for guns or horses or favor. Tohano's reply was short, fierce. The older man snarled something that made the others murmur in agreement. Arabella's pulse pounded in her ears. She should have been terrified, but she couldn't look away from Tohano's face. He wasn't pleading. He was commanding. At last, the circle broke apart. The older man spat into the dust and stalked away. The others followed reluctantly, leaving Tohano standing alone. He turned back toward the lodge. For a heartbeat, Arabella thought she should retreat, pretend she hadn't seen. But she was too late. He caught her watching. Instead of anger, his expression softened. "You are safe," he said, stepping closer. "No one will harm you here." Arabella rose to her feet, her pride flaring. "Safe? I am kidnapped." His mouth curved slightly. "If I meant harm," he said quietly, "you would not wake in my lodge." She stared at him, struggling for words. He moved past her, crouched by the fire pit, and placed a small bowl of roasted corn and venison before her. "Eat," he said. "You need strength." Her stomach growled, betraying her. She hesitated, then sat, lifting the bowl. The food was simple, but after days of fear, it tasted like life itself. As she ate, he watched her, not like a captor, but like a man trying to understand something rare and fragile. Finally, she set the bowl aside. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help me?" He met her gaze steadily. "Because I have seen too much death. And because the woman who shoots at me should live long enough to learn she missed." For the first time, Arabella felt her anger falter. She didn't know it yet, but that was the moment her fear began to turn into something far more dangerous. Curiosity. The nights in the Comanche camp were alive with sound, drums beating low, coyotes crying in the distance, and the whisper of wind moving through the grass. Arabella lay awake under a woven blanket, staring at the flicker of firelight on the lodge ceiling. She had stopped trying to escape after the first night. The camp was too well guarded, and her attempts had only amused the young warriors who watched her from a distance. Tohano, however, treated her differently. He never raised his voice, never bound her hands. He spoke little, yet his presence filled the air like the heat from the fire, impossible to ignore. That evening, he sat outside his lodge, sharpening his knife by the flames. Arabella lingered nearby, pretending to study the stars, but really watching him. The longer she stayed, the less she feared him, and the more she found herself curious about the man beneath the warrior's calm mask. He looked up suddenly, as if sensing her thoughts. "You have questions," he said in his quiet, accented English. Arabella hesitated, pride warring with curiosity. "I don't understand how you can live like this, without walls, without books, without—" She trailed off, realizing how foolish she sounded. He smiled faintly. "Without cages?" Her lips parted in surprise. "It's not a cage. It is," he said simply, "only made of wood and gold." His words struck her like an arrow. She had never heard anyone speak to her that way. Not her father, not any English suitor who bowed to her title. Tohano didn't treat her like a prize or a fragile lady. He treated her like a mind worth challenging. A silence settled between them, heavy and warm. The fire crackled, painting his face in amber light. He reached into a leather pouch and pulled out a flat stone, carving symbols into the dirt. "My name," he said, tapping the first mark. "Tohano." Arabella leaned closer, curiosity overcoming caution. "What does it mean?" He glanced at her, eyes reflecting the firelight. "It means thunder that waits." "Thunder that waits," she repeated softly, almost tasting the words. "That's beautiful." He studied her face, then motioned for her to take the stick. "Your name." She hesitated, then knelt beside him, the hem of her dress brushing the earth. Slowly she wrote Arabella. The letters looked strange beside his symbols, rigid and foreign. He frowned, tracing the letters with his fingertip. "Too many," he murmured, making her laugh for the first time in days. When she laughed, he looked at her with quiet wonder, as if the sound itself were sacred. Tohano pointed to her name again, then touched his chest. "You," he said. Then he pointed to the moon above. "Nani, the moon," she guessed. He nodded. "The moon watches lovers and warriors. She keeps secrets for both." Arabella's laughter faded. "Do you believe that?" He didn't answer, but the way he looked at her made her heartbeat quicken. For a moment the world fell away, The ranch, the fences, the differences that should have kept them apart. There was only the light of the fire and the soft, unspoken understanding passing between them. A child's voice called Tohano's name from across the camp, breaking the spell. He rose gracefully, sheathing his knife. "You should sleep," he said. "Tomorrow you learn our words." Arabella stood as well, brushing the dirt from her skirt. "And what if I refuse?" she challenged, though her tone was softer than before. Tohano's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Then I will teach you anyway." He turned and walked into the night, leaving her standing alone by the dying fire, her heart burning with questions she no longer knew how to ask. That night, as the moon rose high and silver above the camp, Arabella lay awake listening to the wind, and for the first time she did not wish to leave. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm Arabella never expected to know. Mornings filled with lessons in Comanche words, afternoons spent riding along the river with Tohano's people, and evenings around the fire when the women taught her to braid her hair the way theirs did. The tribe had stopped seeing her as a captive. She fetched water, helped grind corn, and even learned to laugh with the children who teased her for her pale skin and clumsy tongue. But every night, her thoughts returned to him. Tohano never lingered near her, yet she always felt his presence, watching quietly, guarding without words. When he passed, the others lowered their eyes in respect. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a leader, one whose decisions shaped the fate of his people, and somehow she, an English duchess with dirt under her nails, had become part of that world. One evening, the sky flamed orange and purple as the sun sank behind the hills. The tribe gathered for a ceremony to honor the harvest, their songs rising into the dusk. Arabella sat apart from the others, her eyes tracing the horizon. Tohano approached silently, a shadow against the firelight. "You do not sing," he said. "I don't know the words," she admitted. "And even if I did, I think my voice would spoil the beauty of theirs." He smiled faintly, crouching beside her. "The wind carries truth, not perfection." She tilted her head, meeting his eyes. "Then perhaps the wind carries too much truth tonight." He looked at her, puzzled. Arabella hesitated, her heart beating faster. "You said once that I was safe here," she murmured. "But I'm not sure that's true anymore." His brow furrowed. "Who has frightened you?" "You," she said softly. The word hung between them, fragile and electric. Tohano's eyes darkened, though not with anger. "You think I would harm you?" "No," she whispered. "I think you already have." She turned her gaze toward the moon rising above the valley, its silver light spilling over the plains. "Every night I tell myself I'll forget this place, forget you, and every morning I wake up wishing I could stay." He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and brushed his fingers along her wrist. The touch was feather-light, reverent. "When you shot your arrow," he said quietly, "I caught it because I wanted to know who would challenge the wind. I thought you were only proud. I did not know you would take my sleep from me." Arabella's breath caught. "What are you saying?" He lifted her chin gently until she met his gaze. The firelight flickered in his eyes, and for the first time, she saw the emotion he always kept hidden. "You ask if the moon carries truth," he said. "Then hear it. I have dreamed of you since that day. I ride and I see your face in the river. I fight and I hear your voice in the wind. You are the arrow I cannot return." Her heart twisted painfully. "You can't say that. We come from different worlds. My people would never—" "Your people build fences," he interrupted softly. "Mine follow the stars, but the stars and fences both belong to the same earth." He stepped closer. The air between them seemed to hum, heavy with something ancient and wild. Arabella's hand rose on its own, brushing the beads at his throat. His breath shuddered. The moonlight bathed them both, pale and unbroken. "Tohano," she whispered. He bent his head slightly, his lips near her ear. "The moon sees us," he murmured. "Let her remember." And before reason could return, she felt his mouth on hers. Gentle, searching, full of the tenderness she never thought a warrior capable of. It was not a kiss of conquest. It was a vow spoken without words. When they finally parted, the world felt changed. Somewhere beyond the firelight, drums still beat and voices still sang. But all Arabella could hear was the wild rhythm of her own heart, echoing his name under the silver sky. Morning light spilled over the valley, soft and golden, but for Arabella it brought no peace. The night before still pulsed inside her. Tohano's words, the warmth of his hands, the taste of the wind between their breaths. She had not slept. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, saw the firelight in his gaze, and felt her heart ache with a longing she dared not name. Yet when dawn came, he was gone. The camp stirred to life around her, women tending fires, children chasing one another, but the place felt emptier without him. She busied herself grinding corn beside a young mother named Nahua, who had become her friend. Nahua watched her in silence for a while before speaking softly. "You dream of him," Nahua said in halting English. Arabella dropped the stone pestle. What do you mean?" The woman smiled knowingly. "Tohano is chief's blood. He carries many spirits. When he looks at you, he forgets the old ones. That is not small thing." Arabella stared at the river's reflection, her throat tight. "He shouldn't. I don't belong here." Nahua pressed her hand gently. "Maybe you belong where your heart sleeps." But Arabella couldn't answer. That afternoon, riders arrived from the nearby fort, white soldiers with polished buttons and stiff posture. The camp tensed instantly. Arabella's heart leapt to her throat as she recognized the man at their head, Captain William Grant, her father's most trusted ally. "Lady Arabella." He shouted when he saw her, his shock plain. "We feared you dead." The world tilted. "Captain Grant," she breathed. "You found me." The soldiers fanned out, muskets ready. "Step aside, my lady. We'll handle these savages." Before she could speak, Tohano appeared on horseback, silent as the wind. His expression was unreadable, but his presence alone made every soldier falter. Arabella's pulse raced as their eyes met. Captain Grant raised his pistol. "Release the lady." "She is free," Tohano said, his English clear, though his voice carried the weight of warning. Grant laughed sharply. "Free? You kidnapped her. You think a filthy raider can claim an English noblewoman?" Arabella stepped forward. "Stop." "He saved me or saved you?" Grant interrupted, fury rising. "You've been deceived, my lady. These people—" "I said stop." Her voice rang through the air. Every man froze. "He has not harmed me. He has shown me more honor than any man I've known." The words left her before she could think. She saw Tohano's eyes flicker, just slightly, but it was enough. Grant's gaze hardened. "You're confused. Your father, he's been searching for you day and night. He sent me to bring you home." Home. The word cut like a blade. Tohano looked at her. He didn't speak, but in his silence she heard everything. "If you wish to go, I will not stop you." Her throat constricted. The tribe watched her quietly. Every heartbeat felt like a choice she could never undo. At last she nodded slowly. "Take me home." Grant exhaled in relief, motioning to his men. But when he turned away, Arabella's gaze remained on Tohano. He didn't move as they led her toward the horses, only said softly, "You walk between two worlds now. The wind will follow you in both." She wanted to run to him, to tell him she didn't want either world without him, but her courage failed. As the soldiers rode east, she looked back one last time. Tohano stood atop the ridge, framed against the setting sun, his hand over his heart. She didn't understand the gesture then, but she would later, because in leaving him she had left a part of herself behind. And even as the walls of her father's estate came back into view, Arabella realized that no house, no title, and no name could ever cage the wildness that now lived in her soul. 2 weeks passed since Arabella's return to the Whitmore estate, yet every dawn felt hollow, each sunrise a pale imitation of the one she'd left behind in the Comanche Valley. Her father rejoiced at her return, though his joy was tempered with anger. He forbade her from speaking of the savages who'd held her, insisting that all memory of that shameful episode be buried beneath silence. But Arabella couldn't bury what still burned inside her. Every night she dreamed of Tohano, his steady voice, his touch beneath the moonlight, the words he'd spoken before she left. "The wind will follow you in both worlds." One morning, she overheard 2 ranch hands talking outside the barn. "They're saying soldiers from Fort Preston plan to raid a Comanche camp," one muttered. "Something about stolen cattle." Arabella froze. "Raid?" the other asked. "Tomorrow at dawn. They want to wipe out the whole band." Her heart turned to ice. She knew whose camp they meant. The accusations were lies. Her father's land, the soldiers' greed. The Comanche were being used as an excuse for conquest. Without hesitation, she made her decision. That night, beneath a sky veiled with clouds, Arabella stole one of her father's horses. Dressed in a plain riding coat and boots, she rode hard into the wilderness, following the same path that had once carried her into captivity and into freedom. By the time the first hint of light touched the horizon, she reached the valley. But peace no longer reigned there. Smoke rose from the ridges and shouts echoed across the plains. Gunfire cracked through the air. Arabella spurred her horse forward. Fear clawed at her, but she pushed it down, calling Tohano's name. The chaos around her blurred. Men on horseback, flashes of steel, cries of the wounded. She saw Tohano at the center of it all, his bow drawn, his movements precise and fearless. When he saw her, his expression changed. Shock, then disbelief, then something fierce and desperate. "What are you doing here?" he shouted as she slid from her horse, breathless. "I came to warn you. The soldiers, they're here to destroy you all." His jaw clenched. "Then you must leave now." "No," she said, gripping his arm. "I won't leave you." Before he could reply, a shot rang out. The force of it threw him backward. Arabella screamed, dropping beside him. Blood stained his side, dark against his skin. Around them, the battle raged. Comanche warriors defending their homes, soldiers pressing forward in formation. She pressed her hands against his wound, tears blurring her vision. "Stay with me, please," she begged. "You can't die here." His hand found hers, trembling but strong. "You should not have come." "I couldn't stay away," she whispered. "I couldn't let them take you from me." Another volley of gunfire cut through the air. Tohano pushed her down, shielding her with his body. "Go," he rasped. "If you die here, your father will destroy us all." But Arabella's fear turned to fury. She looked up, eyes blazing, and shouted at the advancing soldiers. "Stop firing! He's not your enemy!" Her voice carried across the battlefield, clear and commanding, the tone of a duchess who had found her power again. For a moment, even the shooting faltered. Then Captain Grant's voice broke through the quiet. "Lady Arabella, get back! That savage, he saved me!" she cried. "He saved all of us from our own cruelty." The silence that followed was deafening. Smoke hung low over the valley, and even the horses seemed to still. Tohano, pale but alive, looked up at her with something like awe. "You speak like thunder," he murmured, echoing the meaning of his name. Arabella touched his cheek, tears cutting clean lines through the dust. "Then let the thunder remember us," she whispered. The sun broke over the horizon just then, gilding the battlefield in gold. And though the fight was not yet over, something shifted in that light, the moment when love, courage, and truth stood taller than any rifle. After the smoke cleared and the soldiers retreated, silence fell across the valley like a prayer. The Comanche had defended their home, but the cost was steep. Too many wounded, too many gone. Arabella knelt beside Tohano, her trembling hand still stained with his blood. He stirred weakly. "You stayed," he whispered, eyes heavy but alive. "I told you I would," she said, brushing the dust from his brow. Her tears had dried into salt on her cheeks. "You once carried me through fire. Let me carry you through this." She helped him onto her horse, supporting his weight against her as she led them toward the riverbank. There, hidden among willows, she cleaned his wound with trembling fingers and wrapped it with a strip torn from her own dress. He didn't speak for a long time, just watched her, his gaze soft, reverent. "You are not meant for war," he murmured finally. "You were born to heal, not destroy." She met his eyes. "Neither were you." For the first time, Tohano smiled, faint but real. "Then perhaps we both live in the wrong world." As the sun sank over the plains, the Comanche gathered their wounded. Arabella helped where she could, binding cuts, fetching water, whispering comfort to frightened children. Some of the women watched her with suspicion, others with quiet gratitude. They had seen her on the field, shielding their chief with her own body. When darkness came, Arabella sat beside Tohano by the fire. The distant howls of coyotes filled the night, and the scent of sage burned sweet in the air. "I can't go back," she said quietly. "If my father knows I fought against his soldiers..." Tohano's expression darkened. "He will call you a traitor. I don't care what he calls me. I only care about what's right." He looked into the flames for a long moment. "In my people's tongue, we say Nahuani, the woman who walks two paths. You are one of us now, and yet you are not. The world of your father will always try to pull you back." She leaned closer, her voice steady. "Then let it try. I'm not leaving you." Tohano reached for her hand. His fingers were warm despite his weakness, calloused from bowstring and battle. If you stay, your life will be hard. The soldiers will hunt us again. They will not rest until they take this valley or take you. Then they'll have to go through me first, she said, her jaw set. Because I belong here. A hush fell between them, the kind that said more than words ever could. The fire flickered, painting their faces in amber light. At last he spoke again. If you truly stay, there must be a bond. One the spirits and the tribe both will see. She blinked. A bond? In our way, he said, his voice low. A promise before the fire. No church, no paper. Just truth, her heart pounded. She knew what he meant. No father's blessing, no vows in lace and silk, only two souls pledging themselves beneath the stars. I understand, she whispered. And yes. Tohano rose unsteadily, helped by her hands. He took a strand of leather from his wrist and tied it around hers, the knot simple but sure. Then the spirits will know you as mine, he said softly. She lifted her chin. And the world will know you as mine. The fire cracked between them, the light dancing like the pulse of something greater. In that sacred silence, surrounded by the land that had once divided them, Arabella Whitmore, daughter of an English duke, became something new. Not a captive. Not a runaway, but a woman reborn between two worlds, bound by love, defying every rule written by either. The tribe gathered beneath the wide Texas moon, its silver glow spilling across the plains like water. It was the night of the moon ceremony, a sacred time when the Comanche gave thanks for survival, love, and new beginnings. Fires burned bright in a wide circle, drums throbbed like the heartbeat of the earth, and smoke curled toward the stars in whispering trails. Arabella stood beside Tohano, dressed in deerskin the color of sand, her golden hair braided with eagle feathers. Around her neck hung a pendant carved from bone, the tribe's mark of protection. Her pale skin gleamed in the firelight, no longer out of place among them. Tohano's wound had healed enough for him to stand tall again, though the scar across his chest remained, a reminder of both her courage and his near loss. He turned to her now, solemn, his eyes dark as the earth after rain. You came from a world that does not understand us, he said quietly, and yet you have walked through fire for my people. You have faced death at my side. Tonight, you must decide if you wish to stay, truly stay, and live as one of us. Arabella met his gaze. You already know my heart. He nodded once, then looked to the shaman, an old woman with braids as white as the moonlight. The drum slowed. The tribe fell silent. Then speak your truth before the Great Spirit, the shaman said, lifting her hands to the sky. Let the earth, fire, water, and wind bear witness. Tohano took Arabella's hands, his voice deep and steady. Before the spirits and my people, I claim you as my equal, strong as thunder, gentle as dawn. You are not mine to own, but mine to walk beside wherever the trail may lead. The crowd murmured approval. Then Arabella spoke, her voice trembling but clear. Before your people and the stars above, I vow to honor you, not as a chief, but as the man who saw me when I was lost. You gave me freedom, not chains, and in that freedom I found love. The shaman smiled and scattered sacred herbs into the fire. The flames flared blue, the smoke fragrant with sage. The spirits accept, she said. You are bound as one. Tohano stepped closer and pressed his forehead to Arabella's, a gesture of eternal respect and union. The drums began again, faster now, pulsing through the crowd. Women sang ancient songs and men lifted their spears toward the sky. Then, as the ceremony dissolved into celebration, Tohano led her away from the fires to the riverbank, where the moon shimmered on the water. I once thought you were my enemy, he murmured, a woman of the pale world, cold and untouchable. And I thought you were my captor, she admitted softly. A savage, they called you, he smiled faintly. And now I see the truth, she said, reaching up to touch his face. You were never the savage. It was my world that was blind. He kissed her then, slow and reverent beneath the pale light of the moon. The wind moved through the grass like a sigh, and the river shimmered as if the stars themselves had fallen into its depths. I will build you a home here, he whispered against her skin, a place where no soldier, no title, no bloodline can ever find us. You already have, she breathed. Here. She placed his hand over her heart. They stood there for a long time, two silhouettes bound by the night. No longer Duchess and warrior, no longer enemies divided by color, creed, or class. Only two souls who had defied the impossible. In the distance, the drums carried their song across the valley, mingling with the call of owls and the whisper of the wind. By the light of the moon, their love became legend. Seasons turned like the slow spin of a wheel. The grass grew tall again across the valley, and the scars of battle were swallowed by wildflowers. Arabella and Tohano lived quietly in a lodge near the river, the smoke from their hearth curling into the dawn each morning. To the tribe, she was no longer the White Duchess, but Moon Bride, the woman who had crossed from another world to live and love among them. She rose before sunrise each day, grinding maize with the women, weaving soft hides for children, learning the songs that carried the tribe's history through time. She laughed easily now, her voice mixing with the crackle of the fire. And when Tohano rode out to hunt or patrol, she would climb the ridge and watch the horizon, the wind tugging her hair loose from its braid. He always returned, sometimes at twilight, sometimes after days, but he always returned. And when he did, she would greet him with that same fierce, unguarded joy that had first bound them beneath the moonlight. One evening, as the sky flamed gold, Tohano rode back with news. He dismounted silently, his expression thoughtful. "The soldiers have moved east," he said. "Your father's men. They will not return here." Arabella froze. For years, the shadow of her past had lingered behind her, whispering of duty, title, and betrayal. But now freedom, so it's truly over? She asked softly. He nodded. "The land remembers only peace now." She looked toward the setting sun. "Then perhaps it's time to forgive the past. Even my father." Tohano reached for her hand. "You have a warrior spirit, but a heart too kind for revenge." She smiled faintly. "I learned that from you." That night, the tribe gathered once more around the fire. The shaman told stories of heroes and lovers who defied fate. When she spoke of the Moon Bride, the woman who had loved across worlds, Arabella felt the words flow through her like a prayer. But it wasn't until later, when the fire burned low and only the stars remained, that she and Tohano returned to the riverbank where their vows had been spoken. "This place," she murmured. "It's where everything began." He nodded. "And where everything will return." A gentle silence fell between them. The moon hung full and white above, casting silver light across the water. The same light that had once witnessed her arrow fly, when she was a duchess chasing wild legends instead of living one. "I sometimes think of who I was," she whispered. "The girl who rode into this land, bow in hand, certain she was untouchable." "She had to die," Tohano said softly. "So that you could be born again?" Arabella turned to him, eyes glistening. "Then promise me, if ever they speak of me, they'll remember that I chose this life, that I chose you." He stepped close, his voice like thunder softened by rain. "The world will forget the Duchess, but the Comanche will remember the woman who became the moon." He drew her into his arms, and they stood together as the night wrapped them in silver. The river murmured their song, the earth breathed around them, and the stars bore silent witness. Years later, travelers would tell stories of a pale-haired woman who lived among the Comanche and of the warrior who caught her arrow and her heart beneath the same moon. They would say their love changed two nations, that the spirit of the Moon Bride still guarded the valley where the wind sang her name. And perhaps, when the moon rose high and the coyotes called, if one listened closely, they might still hear her laughter, wild, fearless, and free, echoing through the land that had become her forever home.